Fantastic. All right. I think we can get started. The basic agenda here, I think, is to one, just remind everybody that we're all under kind of IETF participation rules here, note well, and all that. And then I think the main agenda here, what I think we want to spend our time today doing is going through the TEEP errata. I set up a couple interim meetings here so that we have a couple more days and times to go through some of this. And if we need to schedule more, we can do that. But today, I think what we want to do is focus on the errata. Alan has kind of gone through and looked at those, so I'll have him kind of go take us through the errata so far that he's looked at and have the proposal so we can hopefully move forward with the resolutions to those. Does anybody have any other topics that they think we need to cover urgently? Questions about the approach or? Okay. Alan, do you want to take control of the screen?
Sure. I don't think I need to do any screen sharing or something. Hopefully everything should be online. What I'll do is I'll start with the actual errata and go from there, if that's okay. So I'll post a link to each errata that we're talking about and just see if we have sort of consensus on that. So if you give me a bit for each one, so that's the initial errata we can take a look at. If people want, I can post links to the commits. So if you look at the actual list of commits, what I've done is I put the errata ID in each of the commits, which addresses that errata. So we can go back and forth and verify that each errata has been addressed in the commit. So if we go to 5765 in the commit, we can see that that one's been changed. And what I'm going to do is I think I'm just going to go through each one. And if people have comments, they can stop me and we'll go from there. So 6157 is the
Alan, why don't you
one.
share your screen with the errata so people know which one you're on?
Yay. Okay, we'll do that. I will, let me pull everything out. Yes, that would make sense. I just have to rearrange everything here. And presentation view, where'd that go? Ask to share screen. There we are, request sent. I've asked to share screen. So I think that, Joe, you should get a pop-up for that.
Let's see.
I'm hoping.
Pop up. Yes. There you go.
Yeah.
Should be having.
Window. There we are. Do we see that or no? No, it's just, okay. Don't tell me I have to quit Chrome and restart it. Yes. Window. Permitted. No.
If you said it,
Sorry, give me a second here. Okay, so won't let me share my screen, and there's no link to fix that.
I can, either you probably need to restart your browser, or let me see if I can share.
Yeah, how about you just do it, Joe, from those links. I'll post the links and we'll go from there. And it's not worth debugging things with a bunch of people on the call.
Let me get to the sharing here. Let's see, for some reason I am not able to share either. No.
Okay, let me quit Chrome. I'll be back in a second.
Yeah.
For 5775. Is one of them perhaps for the first one that you wanted, which was 5765?
I'm back. Let me try screen sharing now, see if that works. Yes. I think should be good. Yay, there we are. Okay. A little bit of fighting later, we're back. So let's go back for a second. 5765. This one is pretty straightforward. The authority CLV is optional.
Right. And we've already, this errata has already been verified. There are two that we've already verified.
Yes. And
so hopefully it's non-controversial, but
yeah,
we can always address it if it is.
Okay, next one is 6157. This is also verified. Status field is 1 octet. And if we go to the commits and massively scroll the screen for a second and bounce around, you see that the change has been made. So it's one of these things of, I tried to cross-link everything where possible, because the alternative is to look at an errata and somewhere, somehow it's been fixed and it's not really clear what to do.
Yeah, and also to resolve the errata, we're going to want to put the text editing instructions into the errata report and have one of the ADs submit it. So it's useful to have the text changes.
Yeah. This one I think is in fact wrong. That is wrong. The correct text is, sorry, what number was that? 5127. The correct text I took from Joe's TEEP errata stuff is not comma 64, but is in fact sending those exact bytes. And I've looked at the code that Alex was working on. This is what it does. This is interoperable with Windows. So
There's
whether or
still
not this is, go ahead.
that 0x4 at the bottom, which is different from as it's hexadecimal 4 rather than hexadecimal 40.
Let me go fix that right away while I make notes here. Okay, noted. Thank you. So if there's any controversy there, no, I will close that, go back to the errata.
Was that the only change that was made?
That was the only change that was made from 5.1. So there was another commit for 5127. This is the first one which followed the errata report. And then I pulled in your changes, Joe, which were the actual correct ones.
Elliot, do you have a comment?
Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning to everyone. First of all, thank you, Alan, for taking this on. It's a lot of work, and I appreciate you doing it. I was saying to a colleague today that the pace of this work is likely to be blindingly fast from an IETF perspective. But that having been said, in this meeting, you're going just a little bit too fast for me to follow.
Sure.
What's going on. And I think I need help from the chairs just a little bit, which is it's really difficult for me to follow what's on your screen. Is there a feature in MeetEcho that allows me to increase the magnification of what's on the screen? I can't tell.
I am able with on my Mac to kind of use the pinch and expand feature. Okay.
There's a box at the top where it says 257 kilobits per second and then a pause, and then there's two buttons that will expand the video or make it full screen. And it would be also better if Alan just hit Control Plus a few times.
So if I did what?
If you hit Control Plus, and ideally you made your browser window smaller.
Oh yeah.
Send fewer pixels, and then they'll be bigger on my screen.
Good point. Okay. It's a bit of a balance one way or the other, but yes, that does look better. Thank you. So my 2 cents for people following along. I mean, we have an hour to go through 10 or 12 errata and a bunch of changes which are not in there. So I will try to push it somewhat. My 2 cents is have follow along with the actual errata, and I will be going back and forth a bit between the changes that Joe suggested in the TEEP errata repository, and then my commits in the actual 7170 biz document. The initial few errata are relatively straightforward. Typos, this, that, and the other thing. I do expect that some of the other ones are going to be pretty horrific, unfortunately, with lots of discussion. So moving on, this one is a similar issue of everything should be concatenated. not commas. And I think I made,
28. This one is 5128.
yes, sorry, 5128. Try and post. Yeah, I'll do less opening and closing of windows because I think that also is a problem. So 5128. I do have commits for that. Let me go there. I believe I do have to update them because the current text still has comma 60. And I don't believe that's correct. But I will have to go double check that against the implementations. So if we change the previous one to have this 0x00, 0x40, then I suspect this one has to do the same thing. Alex, you've looked at this recently, I think. Does this ring a bell or is it pushed off your stack? Maybe, maybe not. Okay. So I need to make a note to update that. So hearing no discussion, that one should be fairly mechanical. I'll check that, and then let me go back to the errata. Scroll down. 5767. This one is a little longer, but is relatively straightforward. The issue is that 7170 is a little ambiguous about whether you send intermediate result after a successful authentication. And so this text clarifies it that yes, you should send intermediate result after every inner method. That's sort of part one. And then the second part is clarifying EAP method versus EAP authentication method, given that there are EAP methods which are not authentication ones. And there's a bunch of commits which address this. I didn't make all of these changes suggested in the errata. This does need to be discussed a bit. And then Oleg's comments were perhaps if there's overlap between the EAP text and the password text, we can avoid the issue of EAP authentication method versus EAP method and just have a generic section describing how authentication works and then remove all this repeated text from the EAP sequences and password sequences text or sections, and instead just have text specifically for that. So the question here is, I think there's no controversy about requiring intermediate result for every inner authentication, whatever that authentication is. And then the next question is, how do we clarify the rest of the text? Do we want to rewrite things a bit, or do we want to just do what the errata suggests and just say EAP authentication method to make it excruciatingly clear what's going on for EAP?
So in that case, we're saying, so your suggestion here is to do specifically for EAP authentication method and then address inner authentication separately, or?
The issue is there's a lot of text about how inner authentication works, and that's repeated both for EAP sequences and for password. And so either we leave it alone and just clarify that EAP method is EAP authentication method, or we do a little more in-depth work and pull all the common text into a new section, which would say, for any inner authentication, here's what you do. And then the EAP sequences, and then in fact, the EAP would not be in EAP sequences, it would just say how EAP works. And the password would not be a password sequences, it would just say how password works. And all the sequencing information would be in a common section, right? Because there's no particular reason why you couldn't do machine authentication with a client cert and user authentication with a password. It should be possible, but the text in the document really talks about EAP sequences or password sequences, and not there's EAP or password and they're all inner things, and it doesn't matter how you mix and match them.
Okay, Elliot?
All of these issues are so intertwined that it gets a little hairy to pick them apart. And I think what you just described would be a pretty major reorg, Alan. And my suggestion would be to not go there. And
Okay.
I may differ from my colleague Oleg a little bit on this, and we'll see. What a couple of key points that I think I would make. First, if we just deal with the EAP authentication functions here, that leaves us open to have a separate discussion about what to do with the PKCS 10, PKCS 7 TLVs, and then also how to handle auth, basic auth. The other point is that no matter what we do here, we have to separate out what to do about an IMCK for cases where you're not running an EAP method. And I do think running an EAP method is qualitatively different than, say, some of the other things going on. So I would say just keep this separate for now would be my suggestion, and try not to go for the reorg.
Yeah, we could always add a sentence or two before this, because these are subsections. We could add a sentence or two before this going, by the way, you can mix and match EAP and basic password. It's fine. In the interest of just having minimal changes to the document. That would work.
Yeah, and I think the key thing there is just to be clear as to, and I think 7170 actually got this one, at least part of this right, which was when you're deriving the IMCK, to derive it from the last, if you have an array of IMCKs, which the only issue is to make clear, and we should make sure that the text is clear about if you're going from, say, an EAP method to basic auth, and we're calculating an IMCK for that, if in fact we are, what it is that means, and what it means for the intermediate result and the crypto binding that follows.
Yeah, one of the other errata and some of the text from Joe's TEEP errata comments adds explicit text that for basic password authentication, the inner IMCK must be treated as 20 octets of 0.
Yeah, what I'm getting at
helps.
is that if you're chaining EAP and basic auth, we probably would like a few informational words as to what that means in terms of what that array, in terms of how you're incrementing that array at that point.
Right.
Okay.
That's all.
Okay, makes sense. Oleg?
I want to add that today we have 3 different terms in the document about what happens inside phase 2. It could be inner EAP method, and the second is inner method. That implies that it could be not EAP but something else, and inner authentication. I think that it's worth to use a single term for all 3 of them and change every occurrence in the document, just to make it very clear to the implementer that they are the same. We treat them the same.
Okay. Yeah, I'll make a note. What I've also tried to do is, I think this is also one of the other errata. There's a bunch of text outside of this EAP sequences section, which talks about EAP method, where it refers to the inner authentication. And I've tried to change those to inner authentication method in order to just avoid the subject of what it is. It's EAP, it's passwords, it's whatever. And then the only text which should refer to the inner EAP authentication method is this EAP sequences section.
We can still do sequences of basic password authentication, one for user, one for machine, theoretically.
Yes.
And they are not EAP.
Yes.
Do we cover sequences elsewhere in the document, or is it just this section covering you?
The basic password section also mentions that you can do sequences of basic passwords. And then there's various bits and pieces scattered around where it talks about, crypto binding or all this, where it references the various IMCKs.
So I think we already covered this, but what it sounds like we need to do is cover that. We have sequences of EAP, we have sequences of authentication that's not EAP, but we could also have sequences of both, right? And the rules should be roughly the same. We don't necessarily need to put all of this in one section because that would be a major restructure, like Elliot said. But we should make sure that that behavior is clear.
Yes. Okay. Okay, let me make some notes for me. Okay. Let's scroll down. 5768. This is the issue of, do we hard code it to, so we create an inner MAC, or there's an inner MAC, and we do things based on TLS 1.2. And the document says it's 20 octets. And this also comes up later in the crypto binding TLV, which says that the compound MAC is 20 octets. This clearly does not work for TLS 1.3, where the MACs are different sizes. And so what would we need to say for TLS 1.3? What would we need to do for different MACs? There's a couple of different options. The code I looked at, and I posted a comment to the mailing list earlier today. Host AP, for example, just hard codes them to 20 octets. And that's hard coded in the source code. And it only supports TLS 1.2. So the question is, if we support TLS 1.3, do we want to say that these MACs are variable size, or do we want to truncate them to 20 octets? That's a bit open-ended. For me, this would be a reason to rev TEEP. If we're going to change the size of those MACs and change the size of the crypto binding TLV, and the current implementations do not support variable size, which is what it looks like, then in order to support TLS 1.3, it might be simpler just to rev TEEP rather than trying to say, oh, for TLS 1.3 support, this thing which used to be fixed size is now variable size. Or maybe
yeah,
not.
I think the previous discussion we had on this, I think we came out with, let's say, always say to truncate to 20 octets,
Okay.
which has its own set of, it's not, maybe not the worst thing to do that, because you still are, you know, using the could be using a stronger Mac, but if you truncate, but there still is potential for, you know, birthday attacks and things like that. That might be more of an issue at some point.
Okay. So some of the text I put in the document change this TLS 1.2 reference to, for example, TLS 1.2, because we don't want a hard code requirement of TLS 1.2 in this. And then if we have time, we'll get into some of the other errata, which also discuss whether you truncate this or whether the compound MAC is, so the crypto binding TLV, the compound MACs are variable sized.
So we have a queue, Elliot and John. So Elliot.
Yeah, thanks. I think the issue here would be if we would even be able to pass the security area review. I mean, the area director is going to, there would be good reason to be concerned, right? If what we're doing essentially is weakening TLS 1.3, somebody's going to say, well, you better go into a lot of detail as to why you aren't increasing the threat surface in this regard. And I'm not going to be the guy who gets up and says, well, here's why, because I just don't know why. But so I think we probably want to think about, you know, not truncating it unless people have a really strong argument. But Joe, you're like a TLS co-chair, right? So, you know, probably you have more to say here.
Well, I think we would need to think through it, right? But I'd like to hear what John has to say.
Yeah, I agree with Elliot that it might raise questions. Cryptographically, I think 20 bytes MAC are plenty. You often use AES-256 with a 16-byte MAC for like the CNSA top secret. So security-wise, I don't see a problem with 20-byte MAC. Just changing TLS 1.3 might raise questions, of course.
Yeah, thanks. Alex?
Hey, I know when I was writing an implementation of using star 384, I think when I was talking to host AP, and Windows 10 and 11 did exactly the same. And all implementations are truncating to 20 bytes. So I think we're stuck with truncation, aren't we?
Yeah, I think we're stuck with Okay, good. We're stuck with truncation until we rev the protocol or rev the. I think the crypto binding TLV may have a separate version on it, or we could create a different crypto binding TLV, right? That you know, just a different TLV number that could have an extensible length.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or another option is simply define it as currently with truncation for TLS 1.2, and then say, by the way, if you negotiate TLS 1.3, the crypto binding TLV and the compound MACs are now variable sized. And that would be compatible with existing implementations because nothing implements TLS 1.3 for deep. And you just go, yep, whatever they do for TLS 1.2, that gets blessed. We're not going to change it. And for TLS 1.3, we can fix it later or not. But at least we have the options and it won't break anything, I think.
Okay.
Hickey also had a comment about EAP notification and NAC. I think in terms of NAC, that's all just EAP discussions, EAP negotiation, and those EAP conversations either end in success or failure, and so the NAC is buried somewhere in the middle and doesn't really affect TEAP at all. For EAP notification, yes, EAP notification exists. I'm not really aware of much of anything that uses it, but it might be useful. This is sort of thinking out loud here. One of the common problems for any kind of Wi-Fi deployment, 802.1x deployment, is there is essentially no feedback from the server to the supplicant through to the end user. I try to log in and I get no. What happened? Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I might get certificate errors. There is no way to get any kind of notice back through to the end user saying, you know, please come down to security, your account has been canceled, or whatever. Yeah, so just thinking out loud, given that we have a prompt for the basic password, it might be useful to add a suggestion saying that EAP notifications should get sent to the end user. This is a change from 7170, but it's new functionality, and if nobody implements it right now, that's fine. I guess the question would be, what do implementations currently do if they get a EAP notification instead of anything else? My guess is
erratum 5768, or it sounds like a new topic, new issue.
It's related to that, I think. So it's all this discussion. It's Hecky brought up a comment here. Okay, well, we can move on to the errata. 5770. This, a lot of text there. I don't remember. I don't want to flip my screen around, but I don't remember which changes went where. 1 second. Yes, I made no changes to the document and instead left a to-do going, we have to discuss this and figure this out. So this errata has no solution right now.
So we did have something.
Let's see.
Yeah.
Oh, there we are. Yes.
There's a pull request number 9 that
pull
seems to
request,
say
yeah.
so.
Number 13.
13 at 13
And yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, I was looking at this morning before my head exploded with too many erratas. Yes, I do believe. Okay, yeah, I believe those changes mostly got pulled in. I'll double check. Maybe not. I'll have to check offline. But those are, yeah. Go ahead, Joe.
We should still validate this because it is a little bit of a tricky. We definitely should make sure it's not changing anything that affects implementations, because I don't think it would, but it would be good to validate that.
Yeah. So this is a complicated one. My 2 cents would be table this one for now and move on, because some of the other ones are pretty straightforward, and this way we can make progress on sort of 90% of them.
Let's do that.
Okay. Let's close that and go back to the errata. 5775. There is overlap between this and some of the earlier ones. So yes, this says when the inner method is basic password, what value do you use for IMCK? And the suggestion and the fix from Joe's errata was just use 0, and that requires text in a bunch of places.
Now, is this indeed what implementations do?
I'd have to check.
Yeah, we checked this, Alan. Yeah,
Okay.
the Yoni's text does do zeros because we looked at this, and actually that's what we borrowed when we did. We sort of horked that text in order to get something going when we were doing the PKCS7, PKCS10 requests. That having been said, I'm not sure it's the right answer from a cryptographic standpoint. And I wrote a pretty lengthy message about this. Now, and then we had a nice discussion, actually a timely discussion, right, between Alexander and myself and you, Joe, about this just over the last 24 hours. And so it boils down to what sort of crypto binding is needed for the authentication method, what sort of crypto binding is needed for PKCS7, PKCS10 TLVs. And whether this stuff should be protected in any case. And there's one wrinkle we didn't get into in email, which is if we're going to bind to, as you wrote, Joe, if we're going to make use of the TLS secret information for this, that there is one possible man in the middle that we might want to sort. And we have to be we should give a little thought to this, which is when the EAP server is not the RA, right? Or not the CA, and therefore needs to basically forward things on to an RACA. And so one example might be if you're using something crazy like, I don't know if it's so crazy, if you're using something like EST on the back end, for instance, well, then how does the secret information from TLS get all the way to the RA? You have to have essentially a proprietary mechanism to do it. And is that what you really want? And that proprietary mechanism is essentially the code that you would have in an integral implementation of the EAP server and the CA. So there's a little bit of hair around that we haven't yet uncovered, I feel. So one answer is that we do away with the password components here, and we just use the crypto binding TLVs for all of this. That's one possibility. Another possibility is we say, screw it, you have to bind to you have to have this integral CA capability, but that might have some pretty interesting deployment implications, and we need to sift through that a little bit. And so I think for today's standpoint, right, I'd be interested to hear what Alan has to say. I'd actually be interested to hear what both Oleg and Michael have to say in terms of the deployment view, and what other people have to say. And maybe we close this out on the next call.
For me, no worries. For me, I don't have a lot of comments on this. I see the CMK derivation is a bit separate from some of the other issues. And until we get into some more actual implementations, I'm not sure I want to sort of stick my neck out one way or the other. Maybe Alex has some more theories.
Hey, I'm wondering about if you are talking to, when you say EST, you're talking about off-host crypto device, right? I'm not familiar with the language. Sorry.
My apologies. EST is enrollment over secure transport, and is, I want to say it's RFC 7030. And there are some amendments to that, some updates to it. Basically, it's a RESTful interface to do PKCS 10, PKCS 7 exchanges. And we
Right,
do that.
okay.
Imagine the server using that on the back end, right, to handle its requests. Now, the issue there is, how do you know that the auth server hasn't turned into a man in the middle, right? And that's what the channel binding is there to address.
Yeah, I would have trying to paste that in. I would have thought that REST API would let you submit crypto calculations. It's an RFC I would need to read and dig around. I don't know. I would expect you, because the HMAC functions or the PRF functions are sort of bog standard, high level, low level crypto functions that you should be able to submit and then receive a reply back of the hash, whilst the other end gets to retain all the keying material and not leak it. That's what I would expect in a deploy.
Just to follow up, the issue here is that the EAP server, the EAP authentication server, has the appropriate keying material from the TLS secret, because it's got the TLS connection, which is shared with the enrollee, right? It's just that the backend CA doesn't have that information, and so that
Gotcha.
would be the information we have to convey out of band in some way, and that's not part of EST.
Right.
Yeah.
Some meditation on it then, I guess.
Yes, that's the complication, and so we need a. I think we just need to give it a little bit of thought. I mean, this is it's a little bit of hair, but I don't think it's insolvable. And if it is, the simple answer is screw it. Don't worry about trying to do something like EST on the back end. At least for TEEP version 1, we just keep going.
Yeah. So I think there's the issue you're mainly raising is around the use of the PKCS 10 TLBs, right, to do enrollment. And so I think we do want to take a close look at that. I think if I remember correctly, when we did this, like either Dan or somebody had recommended the text that we put in the PKCS 10 request in that TLV. But I don't know if that was in mind to be interoperable with EST or to provide the same functionality as EST, or I'm not sure, but we certainly should take a look at that, because I don't think if there's a better implementation route there, I don't think anybody's really implemented those TLVs as far as I know, and so we could, you know, make changes there and to kind of improve that. And I also think we may be able to address the inner method kind of binding issues separately. I don't know that those two things have to be linked. So Elliot, you have code ready, but but you I guess my point would be is if there is a change that's needed, like you're saying, in order to make this work in certain deployments, then we'd want to make that so that you could have interoperability, right? All right, so I think for this one, I think we still have some discussion here, but I think the main, resolution for this particular one was to specify how the zeros are, you know, specify what the initial IMSK is in this case. And
Yeah, I believe that's it. Yeah, I mean, if we go back and forth to the either the errata pushed by Joe or the commits to the 7170 biz document and just look for 5775, we'll get all the updated text there. So I think that should be good for this one.
And we may have
Hearing
a
it.
separate errata or consideration around the PKCS 10 handling.
Yes.
Okay.
5884, that's relatively straightforward. A bunch of the diagrams have to be updated to show that there is either an intermediate result TLV of success or a failure every time we do any authentication. And that just is updated here in the diagrams to match the text from one of the earlier errata. So that's mechanical.
I think that's straightforward.
Hearing no controversy, moving on. Yes, this is largely duplicate. Again, intermediate result TLV gets set after every inner authentication. And that text has been updated in the document.
Whilst we're on this bit, at some stage, do we want to mention to help implementers don't send each success or failure inside that TLV? Would this be roughly where it goes? I know.
Yes. I believe if you look at the commit log,
Oh, right. Sorry.
I pushed changes either late yesterday or today.
Sorry, I missed those. Okay.
Nope, no worries. You had a comment. I was like, God, put it in the document before the meeting. So yeah, there's, I don't know, 30 or 40 commits in the 7170 biz repo. But the goal there was to have each commit relatively simple and understandable, and referring to either the errata or Joe's comment or both. And that way everything is available and accessible. Okay. So just looking at Oleg's comment in chat. Okay, I'll have to think about that. I'll make a note. Moving on. Seven 7145. So yeah, I think the consensus is crypto binding should be sent along with intermediate result TLV and result TLV, and the crypto binding is checked before you look at result TLV. Let me make a note too.
Sorry, Alan, are we saying we're rejecting this one at this point?
Let me just check what I did because I made lots of changes. Let me see. Type madly here. No, I think that should be accepted because
Okay.
there should be some additional text. I think the change noted here is except as noted below, which is where you send failure, I believe. So if you send failure, then you don't need to send crypto binding because you have no MSKs, but you can still send an inner result of failure, which is protected by the TLS wrapper. And you have no crypto binding, but well, you can't do crypto binding if authentication failed. And then the rest of the text here just needs to be double checked. So I made a
Okay,
note for
so
that.
I guess the question is to Joe, like, how do you want to handle this one in terms of the errata? Do you want to, because we're really coming close to, if the text is close to accurate, we could verify it. But for some of these more complex ones, we can simply hold for update, right? Like if we go back to 5770, if we're really going to work hot and heavy on getting all this stuff, on getting this current draft out, then you might as well hold for update. Don't worry about the errata as verification. We just hold for update and work on it in Alan's text.
Yeah, I think we'll have to look. I think once a change gets to be where you're having to modify multiple places in order to understand the change, then it really becomes something I think we need to hold for update. If there's a change that we can make in the errata in one or two places that make it easier for an implementer who's just looking at this document to get something that's interoperable, we could consider like a subset in the errata if it's complete enough to address the issue. So I think we'll have to look at the scope of the change, because if you get too many things in too many places, then it just gets confusing.
Yeah, and that's why I put links to everything everywhere, so you don't have to sort of look at the changes and hope for the best to try and figure out what changed.
Right. What we can do is put together some sample of what the errata would look like.
Sure. This one is really this text. I've made that change, and based on some additional references and Oleg's feedback, there's now a subsection saying, by the way, EAP MS chat is not used. It's the EAP fast MS chat. And I think this is the biggest interoperability issue that people ran into. And when we got closure on this, that's sort of what triggered the timing for these changes. So I think that should be either verified or hold for update, because the actual text in the update will be different from this. I can pull it up if people want, but it doesn't really matter a lot. And I think
how much text is it different?
Let me see. Sorry, which errata ID was it? 7529.
Yeah, if it's a modest change from what's there, Joe has the opportunity to edit that stuff.
Okay, so yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty easy to do in errata. So,
okay.
Okay, so we're just about out of time, and I think we touched on most of the errata except for there's one or two ones I think we didn't resolve. So what I propose is we keep our meeting next week, and we in the meantime try to raise some of those. We have two things to do on the list. One is try to resolve any of the open issues and get the for things that we want to put into an errata. I'll work on getting some errata text together based on Alan's changes to see which ones we can include in an errata and which ones we would hold for update.
Yeah, there's a couple other changes I made based on comments on the list, and things I found. Like the one that I remember is the basic password was not marked as mandatory, but if you didn't support it, you were supposed to send a error TLV, a fatal error, and that was not allowed. And so it should have been marked as mandatory. And there's a couple other small ones, but it's one of these things of, I don't think there's a lot there that's controversial. If you go through the individual commits in that repo, they should be relatively clearly explained, I hope. So yeah, other than 5770 and 5775, I think we fixed pretty much everything, which is very good for an hour and a long technical discussion.
Okay. We're at the end, so thank you everybody for participating. We'll hold the meeting again next week to try to close off any remaining ones, and then if we need additional ones, we can schedule them at that time or after that meeting. I think yeah. Thanks a lot. This is good. And Happy New Year.
You, Joe.
Bye-bye.